of many live videos. We've got a pretty big guest on tonight. So of course, as you know, the topic is 12-volt systems and solar systems and everything like that. So first up, we've got a big giveaway coming up tonight as well. So we're giving away an oil pressure gauge and a temperature gauge. It's a dual REDARC 52mm gauge. So get those questions in because we're going to be picking the most favourite questions. But without further ado, I'm going to welcome in our guest for today. His name's Greg Mitchell. He's a tertiary manager for REDARC Electronics in New Zealand. And he's worked in the factories and he knows the stuff pretty well. So Greg, welcome, mate. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Welcome, welcome. Gee, that was a bit of a big introduction, mate. I better live up to it now.
No problem.
Yes, nice.
Where are you calling in from tonight, mate?
Calling in from home, even though it doesn't look like it with the big REDARC banner behind me. I'm actually just out in my band practice room and office and spare room, so still kind of in lockdown, but yeah, it's good.
No,
All-purpose room.
That's right. So the rest of us, I'm actually sitting in a managed isolation facility in Auckland. So as you know, I was in Australia until quite recently. So I flew back and yeah, here I am, stuck here for 14 days. So.
Oh, mate. Yeah.
It is what it is.
Yeah, sitting in the lap of luxury.
That's it. So I've got a bit of a makeshift studio. It's just me and a laptop. Nice. But here we go. I think we'll dive straight into it. We've had some pretty awesome questions come through. We've posted on social media on Instagram and Facebook, and I know REDARC put up a bit of a post as well. So first question here is Ollie Renwick from Christchurch. Do I need to run a smart battery isolator as well as a DC to DC charger, or does having a BC DC or a Manager 30 take care of all the isolating?
So the BC-DC, so just for people that don't know, a BC-DC is essentially an in-vehicle battery charger. So it takes the charge from your alternator and in most models from solar, and it basically charges your auxiliary batteries that you might put in the back of your 4x4 or your caravan or your trailer, and basically charges those batteries to 100%. But to answer the question, no, they have voltage sensing technology built in, so you don't need another isolator. It's just hardwire from the starting battery straight onto the positive of the starting battery, and then on the other side straight onto the positive of the auxiliary battery, and then there's just one common earth, and that's it. So really super simple. It's all solid state. It all works it out itself. So no, you don't need both products. Definitely not.
No, that's good. Good to know. It's a question that does come up quite a bit. Is of that? Does that come up? And the other question that Ollie sent in was, can I parallel my batteries by using the BMS 30 or the DC to DC?
Yeah. So it depends on the question of what he's asking. If you're asking, can you parallel up two batteries in a bank and charge them from the DC to DC or from the SPI, yes, you can. But I think what Ollie might be getting at is, can you parallel them back? And that's what we call jump starting back from the auxiliary batteries. So essentially what that means is, and a lot of people will want to do this, is you go, right, I got my starting battery under the bonnet. That's all good. I got my auxiliary batteries in the back of the 4x4. If I'm sitting there, parked up camping, and I got the stereo on, and then the next morning you go click, 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 and it won't start and won't go, but you've still got juice in your house batteries, you want to be able to join your house batteries to the starting batteries so you can crank off them. We do have a diagram which is called the ultimate dual battery setup, and I think Lars might have a picture of it on the screen. But essentially, if you use a DC to DC charger and an SPI, you can do that. So you can put like a little jump start button on the dash, which is just a little momentary push button. And if the start batteries weren't cranking, your auxiliary batteries have still got juice. Just push and hold that button in for 30 seconds, let a bit of juice flow into the crank battery, keep it held down, and then crank the engine over and you'll be sweet. So yeah, you can do it, but the product doesn't do it off the shelf. You've got to put two different units in. So yeah, but it's a lot of people love doing it, and that's why we call it the ultimate dual battery setup. So yeah. Cheers, by the way, too, Lars. I see you got a beer there. So
cheers, mate. Yeah, I hope that some of our watchers as well, are grabbing a cold beer and just relax and get engaged in the conversation. It's really cool hearing some of these questions come through. And remember, it's anything 12-volt related. It's not REDARC specific at all. It's anything if you've got questions about how to set up a system. Which leads into the next question that we got. And I've got a 75 amp alternator in my car, and I'm wanting to run either a 1225D or a BMS 30, as well as an Anderson plug to a trailer. And at what point do I need to get concerned about overloading my alternator or think about upgrading my alternator?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, and it's not. I guess it's not a very easy. This is what it is. So what it comes down to is vehicles come out with alternators, and they're rated at how many amps they can put out. I guess at the absolute maximum. So if you've got a 75 amp alternator, and say your vehicle with all the lights, all the heaters, all the factory fitted accessories only draw 30 amps maximum, it means you've got 45 amps to spare. But trying to work that out can be a little bit difficult. You probably need to take it into an auto sparky and get them to test, I guess, how many amps the vehicle's drawing at idle with all the accessories on. And then if you know that, as this question asking person does, it's a weird way to put them, about, they've got a 75 amp alternator. Well, again, if you can go to an auto sparky and say, hey, look, can you tell me how much just my factory accessories are drawing? Then you'll know how much you've got to spare. In saying that, if you've got something like a DC-DC 1225D, it's a 25 amp charger, but if that, that can actually draw up to 35 amps on its input from the alternator. So you do have to be a little bit careful and not just take the output figures as, that's how much it's going to draw on the input, because if we have a low voltage going into our chargers, we have to actually, and we're trying to up the voltage on the output, it means we draw more current. So yeah, look, short answer is I'd go and see your local auto sparky and get them to answer that for you.
Yeah, no, and it's something that's quite important, I think, to make sure you're not overloading your car.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah. Here's a question from Brian in Auckland, and it's probably something you get asked quite a bit. So how can someone with a smaller setup, like a BC-DC charger, get full information out of the unit? Or is this like a standard, like the Manager 30 does? Would be good to know what kind of possible add-ons and things like that you've got when you don't want to put in that full BMS system or battery management system.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So for people tuning in that don't know what a BMS is, a battery management system, or what we call our Manager 30, is a full-scale, does AC, DC, and solar charging, and it also has a really cool little display that shows you exactly what's left in your battery and percentage-wise. And also when you're discharging your battery sitting there at night with your lights and your stereo on, it'll show you how many days or hours you've got until flat. The BC-DC, on the other hand, is DC and solar, doesn't do the AC side of the charging. So a lot of people that are just going out four-wheeling and always off-grid, they'll just put a DC to DC charger in there. It was never, basically the technology was developed in 2009, which is 11 years ago now. And it was designed as a product to go under the bonnet of the vehicle or underneath the vehicle. And I'll show you a picture a bit later on of one that's been dragged underneath the vehicle and still works. But there is a product you can get, which is what we call a G52 VVA, which is a dual voltage gauge. And you can also add in another accessory, which is what we call the GS amps. You put those two products together, it'll give you the voltage of both your cranking battery and your auxiliary battery. And it also gives you current flow. So it'll show you when there's current flowing into the battery or out of the battery. But again, too long didn't read. Short answer is you can't really get any more info out of the BC-DC as it is now. You will notice on a lot of models there is a green wire that comes out of them. You can hook an LED up to that, and if the LED's on, it tells you that the unit is charging the batteries. If it's off, it's not charging. So I guess it's designed that it was always going to be under the bonnet of a vehicle. Really tricky to plug in, network cables and displays and stuff like that. So at the moment, not much information, but if you add in something like that G52 VVA and the GS amps, you can get some really good info out of it.
Yeah, no, that's and it's something. I mean, I've got the full battery management system in my car, and just being able to tell what my batteries are, what kind of state of charge my battery's at, especially when you're plugging in a lot of big consumers like the camera gear, the drone, things like that. It is something that's in my case really is necessary. But like you said, for those guys that are doing kind of more the weekend trips and just want to run a fridge and a few lights and things like that, then you don't really know. You can get away with just a volt gauge, and you don't have to spend a lot of money on having the full management system.
And a lot of the time, if you're going four-wheel driving, you're moving from place to place every day. So if you were sitting in one place for weeks on end, just relying on solar, that's when that state of charge meter is really important. But if it's in your four-wheel drive and you're moving from place to place, as long as you know your battery's going to last 12 hours overnight and you're driving again for a few hours the next day, the BCDC is so efficient and so powerful that it's going to charge it up super quick anyway.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Is that if you know you're driving every day, if you've got a charger that can look after and manage your batteries, then you don't really have to worry about your state of charge. It is like you said, if you're setting up camp for several days on end, that's when you really need to be mindful of your battery state of charge.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
So Richard Norgrove, he's got a question here. Is the BCDC charger a proper MPPT solar controller? And is the firmware able to be updated?
Yeah, so the BCDC chargers we were just talking about, it's a very hot topic, obviously, which is good. They have any of our DC to DC chargers that have a D on the end of the part number. That means dual input. So it means an input from your vehicle's charge system and from solar. And there's two types of solar regulators, essentially. There's what they call a PWM, or pulse width modulator, which is kind of like a dumb regulator. And then you have what they call an MPPT, which is maximum power point tracking. So to answer, Richard, sorry?
That's right, Richard Norgrave, that's correct, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so to answer Richard's question, yes, it is a true MPPT. What an MPPT regulator does is it looks at the input voltage of a solar panel and it tries to hold it at the best voltage, like essentially where the panel's making its the most amount of power, and then it converts it to more current on the output. So I think probably what Richard's getting at is, can we actually take voltage from, 24 or 48 volt panels? The answer is no, we can't. We can only take power from 12 volt panels. So that's what we call up to 32 volt open circuit, but it is still a very, very good MPPT rig. We can't update the firmware in it, essentially because we put the best firmware in it that there is anyway. There's not really much that you need to update in terms of the way the product works. There's not a lot of software, well, there is no software interfacing for the person at the end of the day, the end user, with this current product. So essentially, like, it's one of those products that has been designed, and like I say, it's been on the product 11 years, and you ask anyone who's got one, they just say, mate, you put it in and you forget about it, and it just does its thing. So, there is a few lights on it that will tell you what it's doing. It'll tell you if the MPPT solar rig's working. But to answer the question, yes, it is a true MPPT rig. Yeah, definitely. And it works really, really well at holding those panels, especially in winter. It can get about 35% more power out of the same solar panel that you would usually have a dumb PWM rig. Yeah. So yeah, it works really well.
Yeah. And just quickly with MPPT, I just really basically MPPT can regulate the voltage really well, where the other type is kind of it switches on and off, doesn't it? So it's way less efficient.
Yeah, well, a PWM rig is just basically a switch that joins the solar panel to the battery, and it's connecting and disconnecting really, really, at different frequencies. And if the battery is really discharged at, say, 12 volts, and your panel is in full sun and it can make, it's cranking out 20 volts, the PWM rig will just join the panel straight to the battery and hold it there, and it'll drag the panel's voltage down. Where the panel would have been going, hey, I can make, full power at 20 volts, it's now being dragged down to 12 volts, and it can't make anywhere near what its full power would be. Mm-hmm. Whereas an MPPT rig can actually hold the panel at that higher voltage and convert it to more current on the output. That's the layman's way to explain it anyway.
Yeah, and it's something that, I've been involved with several solar installations, and it's something to look for, is that MPPT controller, because it's way more efficient, and it's you'll get a lot more kind of out of your solar panels and into your batteries. Yeah, which is awesome.
Yeah, it makes them work hard.
Yeah, I'm seeing a few questions coming through from you guys there, which is awesome. And we will get to those. I've got a couple more that came in through social media. And then we'll jump into the ones that are coming in through YouTube. So keep those questions coming, guys. It's awesome to see.
Awesome.
Lithium batteries, here's a big one. Are there any price drops likely for lithium batteries?
Oh, that'd be the $1 million question. I reckon you could make a bit of money on the stock market if you knew that, mate.
Oh, mate, if I knew more about lithium batteries with price differences, that's exactly right.
Yeah, look, there is more and more of them coming onto the market. The Australian market is a lot more mature in terms of acceptance of lithium iron phosphate batteries. And just to dispel a myth as well, we're talking about lithium iron phosphate, not lithium polymer and not lithium iron cobalt. There's a whole lot of different chemical mixtures. Some of them are volatile. Lithium iron phosphate is not. The only thing I would say about lithium batteries as well is if you're going to buy one, make sure it's got a BMS inside the battery. What that is you've got 4 lithium cells inside a normal looking battery, and it's almost like a gatekeeper between the battery terminals on the top and the cells. And what that gatekeeper does is it keeps the cells all nice and cool, make sure they don't get overworked, make sure they don't catch on fire. The good batteries, literally, you can short circuit the battery terminals and they will just turn off internally. They're probably, like in the New Zealand market in the 3 years I've kind of been looking at it, there has been cheaper and cheaper batteries coming on stream. But there's a couple of things that has to do with. One really important one is to look at not just the amp hour rating of a battery, but what we call the C rating. So if you have a 100 amp hour battery and it's rated at 1C, what that means is you can draw 100 amps out of it continuously for 1 hour. You can have a 100 amp hour battery rated at half C, so 0.5 C, and it means the maximum current you can draw out of it is 50 amps. Okay, and you can do that for 2 hours. So just if you are looking at lithium batteries and you go, well, that one's way cheaper than, the product A is way cheaper than product B, look at that C rating. For some people, it won't matter, because if you're only drawing lights, fridge, and small current draw stuff off it, it doesn't really matter. But if you want to run high current draw stuff like inverters, you really need one that's rated at kind of 1C. So, but yeah, look, it's really hard to tell because so many more lithium batteries are being made. There's so much more lithium being pulled out of the ground, but the rate that Tesla's using it and all these other electric car makers, I think there's just an insatiable need for it. So who knows? All I can say is just, keep your eye out, but remember about that BMS. You've got to have a BMS inside the battery, and just keep your eye on the C rating as well.
Yeah. No, and I have seen a few. So there's a few YouTube channels I follow over in Aussie, and they are getting 100 ampere lithium ion batteries for about $600 over in Australia, and those are still some of the good ones. So that's so the prices have come down in the last few years, which is good to see.
Yeah.
Here's one from Instagram. Nick Robb asked the question: what's the best way to set up a 12 volt wiring to keep it nice and tidy and make it easy to fault find?
Yeah, for sure. That's a good question. I've kind of come from an auto electrical background. So one of the things I've learned, especially from when I used to bash my cars around the back in the day, is planning. So make sure you plan out the install. When you're working under the bonnet, obviously you want to make sure you keep away from hot things where any wires can get snagged. But what I always usually try and do is make sure you've got everything you need and a bit more at the start of the install. There's nothing worse than getting towards the end of the day, it's getting dark, and you're like, oh, I'm just going to bodgy that up and tape those wires together in a chocolate block. So obviously try to use where there's different wires for different needs. Try and get different wiring colours as well, and keep the wire colours the same. Because fault finding, if you have one wire connected to a battery at one end and it's red, and then the other end is yellow, you'll be scratching your head because in 10 years' time when something goes wrong, you'll forget about it. So try and keep your wire colours separate for different needs. Always run stuff in a conduit, especially if it's underneath the car. Try and hard mount everything first. So if there's fuse holders or solenoids or relays that need that you're going to have to mount all those first before you run any other wires. So everything that's going to be solid and have to be put somewhere, mount that all up first. And one of the other things is get yourself a really decent set of crimpers and a really good set of side cutters. Other than that, it's just planning. And if you think you go, right, today I'm going to install this DC to DC charger, you think, in a few months' time I might be installing something else. Put in those extra wires and those extra connections now, because we've all seen installs where someone's had a go at it, and then the next guy's doing something else, and the next guy's doing something else, and it's just a dog's breakfast. So just plan it out and plan for the future, really.
No, that's some good advice there. And one thing I can add to that, like you said, plan ahead. If you know or you're planning on getting extra accessories later down the track, put in multi-core wire. You can get wires that have got 4 or 5 different kind of cables within them. So you're not having to run 20 different cables and things like that. So that pre-planning and kind of knowing what you want in the future. If you want to put some lights on the bull bar, but you know that you want some extra ones later on or something like that. Plan for it, and so you can set that up without having to run cables again.
Yeah, good point. And also on that, you've got multi-core cable, but also make sure you use the right diameter cable in terms of square millimeter cross section. So don't just go with the absolute bare minimum, because again, you might be wanting to upgrade your charger later on and it's going to pull more current. You don't want the wire heating up and causing voltage drop. So, it's like anything, you invest at the start and it'll actually save you a whole lot of hassle in the long run.
That's right. And it keeps it nice and tidy where you're not having to pull it apart and redo it. And I've done it myself, like I remember when you looked at my car the first time, and it was a mess to the point where you couldn't leave it and actually tidied up your stuff.
I know. Yeah, it's one of those things. We've all done it, mate.
We've all done it. We all do it. We all love spaghetti under the bonnet.
Yeah, that's right.
We've got one from Brendan Wilson. What's the best type of inverter to buy?
Yep. So there's two different types of inverters, or two main basic types of inverter. So an inverter basically takes the power from your battery or your charging system, DC power. In most of the cases will be 12 or 24 volt, and inverts it up to 230 volt AC. So in a nutshell, that's what it does. But there's two different ways inside those boxes that they do that. There's one which is called a modified sine wave, and another one called pure sine wave. Modified sine wave is cheaper, but I don't recommend them unless you're only going to be running, a certain type of appliance. Pure sine wave is basically, if you get a pure sine wave inverter, the power that comes out of it, and because it's AC, which is alternating current, if you put it on like a spectrometer or a spectrograph, whatever you want to call it, you'll see the wave is kind of waved like that, where it comes out of a wall socket. That's exactly what a pure sine wave will give you. A modified sine wave inverter kind of would look like that. It's all squared off at the edges. And if you can imagine a motor turning around and it's expecting a full nice AC wave like that, and it's getting cut off at the peaks and troughs, it doesn't like it. It overheats, and eventually anything that's got a motor in it or a heating element will eventually fail. So look, just spend a little bit extra money, get a pure sine wave inverter. And also other things to think about are the efficiency of the inverters. So like a REDARC inverter is up to, I think it's 89% efficient. So what that means is it's up to 89% efficient in converting the DC power to AC. There's always going to be heat loss when you are doing the conversion, but if we can convert less of that power to heat and more of it to power on the output, that's a good thing, because it means they're going to run longer. And also think about where you're going to mount it to. All the REDARC inverters have got like a remote switching input, so you can either buy a remote switch to mount on a panel, or you can use any on-off switch. So if like a lot of 4x4 guys will be setting up the back of their wagons with and they'll have a switch panel for lights and everything, and if you've got a spare switch there, you can hide the REDARC inverter away and have an on-off switch there for it. So just a few things to think about there when you look at them.
Yeah, no, that point with the modified and pure sine wave inverters, especially for me with running a lot of sensitive equipment, so like our camera chargers and things like that. For me, I've opted with pure sine wave just to look after that sensitive equipment. So there is a big difference there. They are a lot more expensive, but they do make your equipment last quite a bit longer.
Oh, mate, how gutted would you be if you're out on the road and your missus takes a nice MacBook Air or something like that and plugs it in and it craps itself?
That's right.
You'd be in the dog box, mate. And you know what it's like these days. People are taking their iPads and everything else. And, if you plug something in and you're like, sweet, I save $500 on this inverter, and then it, makes your product crap out or something, you'd be absolutely gutted. So, yeah, just spend a little bit extra and get the pure sine wave one, whatever you do.
No worries. Jason from Bell Block, New Plymouth. Why would I buy a portable solar blanket when the cost of a fixed blanket is so much less? Good point. So fixed panels are like the ones you'd see on the top of a caravan, motorhome, houses, all that kind of thing. The reason that they are lower cost is because there's so many of them being built. There's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands being built, every month, probably every year. Portable solar panels, not as many get built, so they do cost a bit more. But the real thing you got to think about, especially in a 4x4, is you don't really have that much roof space. You think about what you put on the roof of your wagon. You've got fuel cans, you got like rooftop tents, all the extra stuff that you carry. And if you have to put a big, 150 watt panel up there that's going to take up half the roof space, you kind of shot yourself in the foot. The other thing we do get a lot of people saying is, well, I got a roof rack, I'm going to put the solar panel under the roof rack. Nah, it's not going to work. When you shade a solar panel, because there's a whole lot of cells in series, you shade one of those cells, you kind of lose a quarter to a half of the whole panel's output.
So a portable panel, I don't know if you've got it up there on the screen, Lars, but you can kind of see what the weights, it's about half the weight of, equivalent for a portable one. The size is tiny. It's like 330 mil square, so you can fold them up, put them away. The other advantage of them is obviously when you're parked up, like especially if you're out in summertime, you might want to park your rig up out in the shade under some trees. If you've got a solar panel on the roof, it ain't going to be making hardly anything. Whereas get a solar blanket, chuck it out in the sun, you can move it around all day so it follows the sun. They're just so much better, take up way less room, less weight, all that kind of thing. So that's why you pay a bit more for them. Yeah.
No, I've got one of your 190 watt fold out blankets, and I do exactly that.
Yeah.
I throw it out, I park in the shade, throw it out to get the sun, and then as well in the morning. So I'll even if I get to camp late, I'll throw it out in where the sun's going to rise. So even while I'm still sleeping, my batteries are starting to get topped up. So it's worth one thing.
You'll also notice. Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say. You'll also notice with solar panels is if you've got like a little meter on your panel, you'll see that like if you have it flat on the ground and the sun's kind of up there, if you move it so that it's like that facing towards the sun, you almost double its output in a lot of cases. So if you've got a panel that you can kind of, hang off your, you might have an awning that pulls out, and our panels have like little holes at the top that you can hook onto the side and, put them out at an angle. You'll make way more power too. So they're just more versatile, and you can make them actually work harder. Yeah.
No, that's right. It's they are handy, but it's one of those things to consider. So if you're planning a trip and you're going to be driving every single day, you might not need a solar panel. If you're planning on camping for any length of time and wanting to stay off grid without having to run your car, then solar is definitely something to consider. I still do most of my driving. I drive every day, but if I get to camp early, I just like knowing that those batteries are still being fed.
Definitely.
I've got a question here from Brad. Where's the best place to mount a DC to DC charger?
Yep. Easy answer, as close as possible to the battery you're trying to charge. So in a ute four-wheel drive, it's usually pretty easy because a lot of times, a lot of people now will actually mount the auxiliary battery under the bonnet. There's heaps of like aftermarket trays you can get for mounting batteries under the bonnet. You mount the DC under there as well. Doesn't matter if you go driving through rivers, getting a whole lot of mud dust, the DC is actually fully potted on the inside. I don't know if you can see that. I'll just bring it up to the camera, but that's what the inside of these things look like. And you can see they're kind of filled with silicon. So you can mount that anywhere under the truck, under the bonnet, anywhere you like. If you're towing something, like if you're building a camper trailer or you've got a caravan that you want to put one in, a lot of people, because they're used to putting in voltage sensitive relays, or what we call an SBI, a lot of people will want to put that under the bonnet of the vehicle. But the issue is the output of this, even if we're cranking out 14.6 volts, by the time it travels down the length of the vehicle through the Anderson plug and then all the way down to the battery, you're going to get voltage drop. So if you're planning on putting this into something you tow, or you got a battery in something that you're towing, put it in the actual caravan or the camper trailer or whatever it is, so as close as possible to the battery is the answer.
Yeah. We remember that video we filmed together and if you go onto our YouTube channel, in the videos, you'll see one that Greg and I did where we actually explain the BCDC being close to the battery with low current coming out of the battery. Like you've got 12.6 volts or something coming out into the DC-DC charger, and how the relationship between low voltage out, but it takes a lot of current, which then transforms it into a higher voltage and less current into the battery. Where if you didn't have that, the battery wouldn't charge at that 12.6 volt, which is a cool video. So if you're more interested in that, just jump on to one of our videos on our page with REDARC, and you'll see the exact explanation and a visual cue to that as well.
Definitely.
We've got here Scott from Auckland. I've got a caravan and I want to install a DC to DC charger to charge the house batteries. Can I power the DC to DC charger through an existing 12-pin trailer plug?
No, not really. So a lot of people will be familiar with a normal trailer plug in New Zealand, which is like a flat 7-pin plug that's got all your brake lights, earth pins, indicators, all that kind of thing. Those pins are only rated about 10 amps each. What Scott will be referring to is a 7-pin, which has your normal 7 pins for your lights, and then it has another 5 bigger pins on there. and those pins are rated at 20 amps each. But even our smallest DC to DC charger that you would put in a caravan is 20 amps. So you might go, oh yeah, I could double it up and go through those extra pins. But the reality is, because we're drawing more than 20 amps on the input quite often, because of the voltage drop that happens when you go from a start battery at this end to a battery in the caravan, which could be 10 meters away, we could draw 25 to 30 amps. So the answer is nah, don't try and go through that 12-pin plug. Definitely don't go through like a 7-pin plug. Just put in an extra Anderson plug. Anderson plugs are dime a dozen. They're cheap as. There's no way you can stuff up the connections with them, and they're really, really sturdy and strong, and they'll handle up to 50 amps. So just chuck one of those on. Like, I know it can, people go, it's an extra hassle because you've got to run another wire, underneath the vehicle. But the reality is, if you've got a usual four-wheel drive, it's not that hard to get up underneath it, run a wire in some conduit right down the chassis rail and hook it up to the start battery with a fuse. It's pretty simple to do. And I liken it to if you went and put a massive big V8 in your car and then you upgraded the fuel pump, but you didn't upgrade the fuel line. Well, the DC-DC is like the fuel pump. If you starve that fuel pump by putting in two smaller hose, it's the same if you starve a DC-DC by putting in too small a cable, you're never going to get the maximum out of it. So, and likewise with that connector, you've got to have the connectors that can handle the current too. So, yeah, put the Anderson plug in. Like I say, they're cheap as chips. So, yeah.
And it really is the thicker the cables, the less voltage drop you're going to have through the whole system. Running from your start battery to your caravan or trailer or something like that is quite a long cable run.
That's it. Yeah, exactly.
Megan from Wellington. I'm just starting to set up my truck for overnight camping and want to install a secondary or auxiliary battery to run my fridge and some LED lights. Do I need a DC to DC charger, or would a VSR do the job?
Yeah, look, good question. REDARC started off making VSRs, or what we call SPI, smart battery isolators, like years ago, and there is still a place for them. So it depends on your vehicle, Megan, to be honest. If you've got, and there's a really good, if you just go into Google and type in REDARC calculators, there's a really cool tool on our website that's called Dual Battery Selector. And it doesn't by any means have every vehicle, but it has a lot of common four-wheel drives that are used for towing and setting up as a 4x4. It'll tell you what type of alternator you've got. So if you've got a fixed voltage alternator, you can probably get away with just using an SPI, like a VSR type arrangement. We call it an SPI 12. Whack one of those in there, because your fixed voltage alternator is always outputting about 14.4 volts. It will charge your battery to about 75-80%. And if you're, again, only parking up for one night at a time and moving on the next day, it'll be sweet. But if you've got temperature compensating alternator or a variable voltage alternator where the voltage can drop lower and also get up like crazy high with variable voltage ones, that's when you absolutely have to have a DC to DC charger, because it won't charge up the auxiliary battery properly with a VSR. Yeah. You still get away with it, but a lot of people don't realise with deep cycle batteries, which is what you put in the back of your truck to run your lights and stuff, you can only drain them down to about 50% before they actually start being damaged. So if you go and buy a 100 amp hour battery, you can only draw about 50 amp hours out of it. It'll keep running, obviously. You draw them more than, you draw down below 12 volts. It'll keep on running your lights, but you're actually doing a little bit of damage each time you do that. So if you recognise that with a VSR, you can only get your battery up to about 75 to 80%, it's only just over half full of usable capacity, whereas a DC to DC charger will get you to 100%. So if you think you're going to be running a whole lot of camp lights and a fridge and you want to stay somewhere for a longer period of time, go with a DC to DC charger. If you think you just got an older vehicle, basic alternator, and you're only camping for 1 or 2 days max at a time, VSR, will probably do the job for you.
And that's a good point, actually, with the older vehicles. So, as a bit of a rule of thumb, the older vehicles will have kind of your standard alternator, and the newer vehicles, newer Hiluxes, basically anything, around the early 2000s coming to now is you've got to start thinking about what kind of alternator you have. So that is something to keep in mind.
That's where that tool on the website comes in really handy, because you put in make, model, and year, and it'll spit out and tell you what you've got, and then you can go through and say, all right, I've got this size battery, There's also another good one on there called Solar Calculator, and you can put in what size battery you've got, what you actually want to run in terms of lights, fridge, and everything else, and then it will tell you what we recommend in terms of solar. So yeah, there's some really cool tools on our website, so go and check it out.
We've got a question here from Jamie from Christchurch. Why should I pay more for a REDARC branded product?
Yeah, no, good question. Don't worry, I get it. I get it all.
No, they are. REDARC is not no secret. They are one of the more expensive brands around there.
Look, we don't make any secret of it that we're not the cheapest product on the market by any means, but I liken it to why do you go and buy a Hilux, or in your case, a Land Cruiser, as opposed to, maybe a Great Wall or a Cherry or something like that. You buy it because you recognise the name, you know what's gone into it, you know the reliability. And I think there's a picture that Lars will chuck up on the screen of one of our DC to DC chargers that actually got dragged underneath a vehicle up in Cape York over in Australia. So basically all of our products are tested in-house, and we test them to the breaking point. We go back and fix them and then test them again, and we have all in-house testing now that basically shakes the crap out of the product, flexes it, cools it down to minus 150, and then heats it up to plus 200 degrees, all within the space of 5 minutes. And if we put a product in there for 3 weeks, we can basically simulate 10 years of that product's life being on a truck in the outback. This BCDC that hopefully you can see on the screen there, that was on a bracket mounted under the bonnet of a 4x4. That bracket broke, and because it was hanging on its cables, it got dragged underneath his car. The dude got out, looked underneath the car, because it was all covered in mud and stuff underneath there, he couldn't see it. So he kept driving for another 200 k's until he pulled into a servo, looked underneath, found this DC to DC charger, like torn to pieces, like all the bloody tin hanging off it. It's actually still working, and that's actually in our factory now as a testament to how, I guess, how rugged our products are. So you're buying reliability. So that's essentially what you're paying for. Our products have been tested. They're made in Aussie for Aussie conditions, and although it gets colder and wetter here, it's pretty bloody wet, pretty hot, pretty dusty over there. So if it can put up with Aussie conditions, you're probably not going to kill it over here in NZ.
We can try.
That's what you're paying for.
We'll give it a go.
That guy certainly did.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that guy certainly did.
Tim from Glenfield, he's got a question here. I want to run a compressor fridge in my Hilux 24/7. What size solar panel do I need?
Yeah. Look, and that's a good question. We get it all the time. There's a couple of things there's a few myths about solar panels that people think that a solar panel actually runs the accessory directly. Whereas essentially, if you think about an off-grid plumbing system, so if you've got a friend that lives out on a farm and they're on tank water and they collect their water from the roof of the house and it goes into a tank, your solar panel is like the roof, okay? Your tank, or the battery, is like the tank, and your fridge, in this case, is like the little hole that's drilled in the bottom of the tank, draining that water out. It's running the power all the time. So it all comes down to the size of your battery, and also how many solar panels you can fit on the roof of your wagon or your RV. You can go to our website. Again, if you just Google REDARC calculators, there's one on there called Solar Calculator. You can put in what type of vehicle you've got, what you're towing, if you're towing anything else that might have batteries, what the size of your battery is. You can put in a whole lot of different inputs, and we will spit out the end and say, this is what we think you need, or, this is what we recommend. So just go to our website, have a look on there. That'll give you a much better idea, because otherwise, even if I had my calculator here, I couldn't tell you. There's a lot more complex math that goes into it, and it's all done on our website. So, yeah, go and check that one out.
Yeah, no, there's some good stuff there. So the last question that we got from social media before we move on to our YouTube questions. So remember, get those questions in, guys. We are giving away a oil pressure and temperature gauge for the best questions. So fire away now. Brandon from Tauranga, do I connect my winch to the starting or auxiliary battery, or both with a solenoid? That's a great question. It's something that I'm going to be doing in our new 76. So I'm pretty keen to hear your response to that one.
Yeah. Look, most people, when they're putting a winch on the front of their 4x4, they'll just hook it straight up to the starting battery, which is, the battery that runs your vehicle and cranks the engine over. A lot of people, and because it's 4x4 and it's been done for years in Aussie, have kind of gone, well, look, if I'm putting in an extra battery under the bonnet, a deep cycle, why can't I use that for winch? Because if you're winching up like a really long hill, you don't want to have to be sitting in the car revving it and keeping the alternator going, and because winches draw a lot of current. So what a lot of people will do is have like a solenoid in there that will join the two together. Lars might have a picture up on the screen there, just a wiring diagram that shows you one of our SPI solenoids. And all it is like you have on a winch, obviously to engage the winch, you have a button or a little hand controller, and it will usually that little switch to make the winch go has a positive feed on it. You just hook that up to a relay or to one of our SPI relays, and what happens is as soon as you engage the winch, it joins both of the batteries together. So it's a really cool way of doing it. And there is other diagrams that we have that you can have your DC to DC charger, and you can have that dual winching setup, and you can have another relay to do your ultimate dual battery setup. So yeah, again, there's so many wiring diagrams on our website. And look, if there's something that's not on there, and you go, hey, I want to do this, just pick up the phone, call us, email us on our power@redarc.com.au email address, and our tech support guys, they're all like freaking awesome. There's one guy there who's been there for like 35 years. He's just a real brains trust. And when you pick up the phone and call REDARC, you'll always get someone answer the phone and you say, hey, I want to speak to tech support. We've got at least half a dozen guys on there that are ex-auto sparkies, auto electricians, auto electrical guys. They all know their stuff. So there's not much that they can't answer for you, and a whole lot smarter than I am. So yeah, if you got any tricky curly ones, call them.
No, definitely. And even if you're watching this video later on, while we're not live anymore, or even just shoot us a message on the Full Drive New Zealand Facebook page, or comment on the video, and I can get those questions. I can ask Greg and kind of come back to you as well.
Yeah.
And that's any time. If you've got any questions about any of the gear we have, of course, fire them through. I'm lucky enough to be able to talk to a lot of the industry experts and get some kind of behind the scenes, real world or real answers. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's us.
What we're here for.
That's right. Yeah, that's us done with the previous questions that we had. So we'll move on to some of the YouTube questions. So it's good to see you guys interacting here. So we've got John Tyson. He's just saying good day from Canberra, Australia. Watching over there. So it's good to see some guys over in Aussie watching through as well.
That's awesome.
So I've got one here from Tony Chambers. The 1225D is an awesome product. Built my dual battery system in my Hilux with an ink battery link to link that you've talked about. So he's just saying great products. He's using them and he's loving them.
Nice, awesome, thank you.
There's one here from Phil Weber. Hi, for someone who's starting out, what would be a good dual battery setup to start off with?
Yep, yeah, definitely. Again, it all depends what you're doing. I know, especially when you're starting out, my budget might come into it. But again, if you think you really like this 4x4ing hobby and you want to do things properly right from the get-go, go on our website, go to that dual battery selector, go on that solar calculator, and again, hopefully it'll spit out what you actually need. But there's always going to be a few main components. Obviously, you're going to have your start battery anyway, and you're going to have your deep cycle battery. It just depends what you put in between those two. Again, if it's a modern vehicle that has a temperature compensating or variable voltage alternator, go with a DC to DC charger. And again, if you're considering solar as well, like if you're going to have portable solar or fixed solar on the roof, just go with a BC-DC like one of our 1225Ds or 1240Ds, because it's got the solar rig in there, you've got the DC to DC charger, takes care of everything automatically, and it's even helping to save the planet a little bit. And the fact that if you've got a solar panel on the roof of your vehicle and it's a nice hot sunny day and you're driving down the road, if we can give your deep cycle battery all the power it needs just from solar, we won't take anything from the alternator, which means we're not loading up the engine, which means you save a little bit of fuel. So they're smart enough that they can actually do that. So we'll always use the greenest power source.
That's
awesome.
I've forgotten about that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So yeah, look, it depends on what you're going to be using it for. If it's stop here one night, next place the next night, and you've got an older vehicle, then just put in an SPI 12. But yeah, look, if you're going to be camping for longer periods and you're going to put solar on there, go with a DC-DC 1225D or 1240D. Or you can even go with the really fancy one with the red stripe, which is what we call the 1250D. So it's got the red stripe down its back. That's the gruntiest one we have. So and that's actually a 50 amp charger with the solar rig built in as well. So yeah,
no problems.
That's the bee's knees.
No problems firing up the batteries then after that. I think one thing that I might just add to that as well is sit down and work out what you want to run and how much that's going to draw. If you've only got a fridge and a couple of lights, it's not that much. But just work it out. Write it down on a piece of paper, add it all up, and that'll give you a good idea of how big of a battery you need to buy as well. If you can get away with 50 amp hours, 75 amp hours, or you need to go up to 100 or something like that. That's a really good place to start. It's just, what do you want to do?
Yep. Yeah, and that's a good point, Lars, because you start from the load, what do you want to run, and you work backwards. So it's the load, the battery, the charger, and then how you're going to charge it. And that's, again, where that solar calculator on our website is just absolute gold, because you can put that in. You can say, this is my battery size, and you can just tick box, these are all the loads. I've got a 35-litre fridge or a 70-litre fridge. I've got lights, I've got a hairdryer, whatever. And then it will actually spit out and say, this is how many amp hours we think you're going to use in a day. And then you can go, all right, hang on, I'll go back and I'll up the battery size at the start of the calculator. So it just does all the math for you. So answer your questions, just go to our website and put all the info in there. Saves you having to get the pen and paper out and stress the old noggin.
There we go.
Yeah.
I've got one from PTW Melly. He said, I have a pure sine wave inverter connected to my starting battery, as well as a deep cycle battery for camping. Can I charge my deep cycle battery by plugging in my CTEC charger into my inverter? So I guess he wants to use his starting battery through an inverter to charge through a kind of a battery charger that's not a DC to DC charger. It's an AC to DC charger, basically.
Yeah, look, I wouldn't recommend it. You can do it, but again, it's going to come down to a few factors. Depends how many, so what you're essentially doing is you're going from 12 volt DC up to 230 volt AC. Then you've got a 230 volt AC charger, and then that's going back down to 14.5 volts DC. So, and all of those conversions going from AC DC back down to AC, you're getting a lot of losses. Yes, you can do it, but again, if that inverter and if that charger you've got, like if you go and put a 30 amp, plug in the wall charger, that's going to draw a lot of current, about 5, 6, maybe 700 watts. And yeah, it's not. You can do it, but it's not very efficient, and I wouldn't recommend it. And then you're going to have AC in your car. You're driving down the road, the thing's tearing the whole time. It's getting hot. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons not to do it, but a DC to DC charger is a lot more efficient because it's just upping the voltage on the output from DC to DC. So yeah, on paper, yeah, you can do it, and again, I especially wouldn't do it if those batteries you're trying to charge are in like a caravan or something, because again, you're gonna, you got an AC charger in your vehicle, and then you're gonna have an AC lead running between your vehicle and your caravan, and it'll work, but it's not a good idea, and it's not efficient. So,
and I guess the other thing of it doesn't act as the isolator, so you have to consciously remember that the thing's plugged in and charging, rather than just turning the car off and the DC to DC charger just basically turning off as soon as the voltage drops down low enough.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, you put in the right equipment, a DC to DC, a BCDC or an SPI. It takes care of everything itself. You don't have to think about it. You just turn the vehicle off and walk away. There's no chance of being stranded with a flat battery. So,
Craig Harriott says, "Great advice, Greg and Lars. Enjoying sharing a beer with you guys. Cheers, Craig. G'day, mate."
Oh, nice, Craig.
Yeah. Good evening from Belarus, Europe. He's really honoured to distribute REDARC products overseas. He must be a sales agent overseas. Thanks, mate. Thanks for tuning in.
Oh, nice. Thank you very much.
Great info, guys. This is from John Simpson. Great info, guys. DC to DC for power in. Got it. Wondering if you guys have anything that is idiot-proof power use. Not the full BMS, something that beeps when you're too close to low volts during the night having beers and chats around the campfire.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. Yes, we do. Yep, definitely. So that is a variation of our SBI 12. So it's what we call an SBI 12 LLD. So that stands for low voltage load disconnect. So what this little unit does, and I haven't got a diagram to put up on the screen, but again, if you just Google SBI 12 LLD, you'll find it on our website. And this is almost like that little gatekeeper that goes between the positive terminal of your battery and the loads that are drawing off it. So what it will do is it doesn't give you any advance warning or beeps, but what it will do is that if the batteries are getting low, and it gets down to a certain low voltage point, it'll cut everything off so that it stops your battery being drawn down. In a lot of cases, a lot of the time when people damage their batteries, it's inadvertent. So they might have their caravan or whatever, been away on a big trip, they forget to turn something off, they lock it up, they come back in a couple of weeks' time, their batteries are absolutely like dead flat. Pure accident, they didn't mean to do it, whereas one of these SPI 12 LLDs will actually stop that from happening. It'll just isolate the batteries, so it's say like 10.5 or 11 volts, I can't remember the exact set point, it'll just cut everything off. And then once the battery's charged back up again and it gets to a higher set point, it'll reconnect the loads again. So, yep, we definitely have the product for that.
No, good question. It is something, it really, if you set up a good 12-volt system, it is something you can just forget about, Obviously, you've got to keep in mind how much you're drawing through, but there are fail-safes in place so that if you do go below, they do cut out automatically. Just to add with that, most fridges and things like that do have low-voltage cutouts, so your fridge will actually cut out before it damages your battery as well, if something to add in there as well.
Yeah, fridges will. The other real killer of them is lights, though. Like LED lights will just keep working till it's super low voltage, and and it's a really good point because you're spending $350 plus on a deep cycle battery. Sky's the limit really. For $200 for this little device, it can save you a lot of money in the long run for one of these little SPI 12 LLDs. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Got a question here from Print Shell 8765. What's our thoughts on lithium batteries over AGM? From personal experience, lithium is absolutely incredible. It's light, it lasts forever, and I've got a 100 amp hour lithium battery in my truck, and it's amazing. I've never drawn it below like 60%. But let's kind of get into the why the differences, and both are good. AGM is still a really good option, depending on what you want to do with it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so there's a few. An AGM battery is still a lead acid battery, so it's absorbed class matte. What it means is the liquid, the electrolyte that's usually sloshing around in a wet cell battery is absorbed into like a fiberglass matting that goes between the lead plates. So if you pick up a lead battery and shake an AGM battery and shake it around, you won't hear any of that liquid sloshing around in it. So an AGM battery you can store on its side, upside down, whatever. Nothing will come out of it. So the advantage with lithium is that they're lighter, which most people know. They're probably a quarter to a third of the weight. So if you're setting up your rig and you're getting close towards your GVM of your max weight that your rig can handle, a lithium battery can save you a lot of payload, or can give you more payload. They hold their voltage a lot higher, so you will probably be aware of, like a lot of people be aware of the old school battery drills where you go, and it would just start slowing down and start losing power and then eventually die. Whereas when you've got a new, like say a DeWalt or a Makita that's got a lithium battery, they just go, and then they die. And it's the same with a lithium battery. They hold their voltage higher, which means they draw less current as you're draining them down. So they hold their voltage, they run stuff a whole lot longer, but the big advantage is in time. So, and what I mean by time is lifespan. So an AGM battery, drawing it from 100% down to 50% back up again is one cycle. And if you do that on a standard AGM battery, you'll get about 500 cycles. On a decent lithium battery, you're talking more like kind of 5,000 cycles. So it's 10 times the lifespan. So yes, more money at the start, but over the long, if you're going to set up your rig and, do it up and load an AGM in it, but if you think you're going to keep it for a few years, and you want the performance and you want to just put one battery in and forget about it, go with a lithium if you can afford it. The other thing to consider with lithium is you have to have a charger that's lithium compatible. There are batteries around, battery suppliers tell you that you can charge a lithium battery direct from an alternator and straight off a solar panel and yada, 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 but if it doesn't have a lithium profile in it, you'll be back buying another lithium battery in a few years' time, because yes, it will charge, but the lithium batteries don't like it. It's like getting a high-performance engine and running it on 91. It's not going to last. You've got to put that high-octane fuel in it. And again, it's just matching it. You've got to match the battery to the charger. So if you go lithium, definitely I recommend it. It's the same as you, Lars. Go for it, but make sure your charging system's up to it, because then you're maximising it. They're going to charge up faster. That's the other key with lithium. They charge up way faster. When you're putting power into a battery, there's always some of that power that gets converted to heat. With a lithium battery, less of that power gets converted to heat, therefore it charges up faster. And if you've only got 10 amps available off your solar panel, the lithium battery is going to absorb more of that current than an AGM will. So yeah, that's the difference.
Yeah, no, so there's definitely, I mean, lithium is if you've got the budget, go lithium any day of the week. I did my first South Island trip with 75 amp hour AGM battery, and it powered a fridge and some LED lights, a little 300 watt inverter for a laptop. And I mean, we were driving every day, and it worked every day. The charging system itself didn't work too well, but the battery, and that was a 2-month trip. But after that, 6 months down the road, I had to replace the battery. Where my lithium battery is like, it's still going strong. And the other big thing I think we worked out when we installed my lithium into my truck, to have the equivalent. So I've got 100 amp hour lithium in my truck, and to have the equivalent amp hour available with AGM, you're looking at about 70 kilos worth of batteries, where my battery weighs 16 kilos. So it's it's massive.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Save a lot of weight.
Yeah. Question here from John Tyson. BCDC 12 in my 1980 Land Rover, 1 starting and 2 house batteries, 70 litre fridge, 180 watt solar, common power rail for bonnet to the back of the end of the house batteries. Love the BCDC 12. So he's getting good results out of it.
Awesome.
And then another question here from Prince Shell 8765. Can I use a voltmeter on a lithium battery to tell what capacity it's at?
Look, that's a good question. No, you can't. In a normal lead acid battery, a voltmeter will give you some idea of where your capacity's at. So on a normal lead acid battery, when there's no charge going into the battery and nothing being drawn out of it, 12.7 to kind of 12.8 volts is considered full. 12 volts is considered empty. And that's with a voltmeter, you can kind of get a bit of a bearing where you're at with a lead acid. With a lithium battery, you can't, because they stay at about 12.8 to kind of 13 volts until they're almost flat. Like you'd kind of see it just sitting there, and then it would just go bang and just drop straight off. So no, you've got to have a shunt, and that's where like the Manager 30 really comes into its own, because the Manager 30 has a lithium profile in it, charges from AC, DC, solar. And it can actually tell you by looking at how much current has gone out of the battery and back into it, and lets you know exactly where you're at. So yeah, again, lithium battery, you've got to have somewhere like a state of charge meter. Otherwise, you're kind of flying blind.
Yeah. No, that's
a good question.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. Prince Shell just says thanks for the advice, guys. That's awesome. It is. I mean, with my Manager 30, it really, I can see exactly what's going in. And I can see exactly what's coming out as well, and I can see if it's coming in through solar, through the car, or obviously I can plug it into 240 volt as well. And it makes planning the campsites and planning my power usage really easy. I can plug things in, and it tells me I've got 20 hours left, or I've got 4 hours left, depending on how much I'm drawing. And you can plug something and go, ooh, maybe I better unplug that again because I've got to sit here for another 2 days. So.
That's it. Yeah, it's almost like not even camping, because you know exactly what you've got all the time, and there's no stress.
There's no battery anxiety. No, it's I mean for the filmmaking side of things, like what I've started doing, I wouldn't be able to do it without having ample amount of power and just having it on tap. And when we're driving along, we've always got a couple of camera batteries charging, normally a handheld radio. I've always got a drone battery on charge. This thing's going all the time, and I did a trip last year in a mate's Hilux, and I really struggled without. Well, I mean, we had the factory little inverter that comes in the Hilux, and that was it. So we're trying to fight over cigarette lighter sockets and 12 volt or USB sockets, and it reminded me of how good things can be. What I like about it, there's so many different levels that you can set your car up to. You can set it up for weekend trips. You can set it up for literally, living out of it for a year or for a month-long trip. And there's so many different products around for the individual person. So,
and that's it, mate. Yeah, and I guess that's where REDARC comes into it. Australia is, I was born in Parapara Umu, so I'm not Australian. Everyone always thinks I am, but I'm not. But over in Aussie, mate, like they go so far out into the middle of nowhere, and we're wanting to do that, especially with now we're coming out of lockdown. There's going to be so many people that are going, right, I can't travel overseas. Let's get out and see the countryside. That picture you've got behind you looks like it might be down in South Island somewhere, or somewhere so remote. If you're out there and you've set up your gear, you've spent $500,000 or more on a fridge, you want that thing to work. You don't want to stuff around with getting to this beautiful place and then going, oh, I've got no power, I've got to go home, mate. So you just set it up once, you set it up right, and you can go out and explore this country now, which a whole lot more of us will probably be doing.
Yeah. Mate,
and who wants warm beer, mate? No one. Keep your fridge running, eh?
Mate, you absolutely summed it up. That picture behind me is, for me, that's why I put it up there tonight. It sums up what overland travel in New Zealand is to me. That was taken in the Oteki Conservation Park in February, and you can see there's snow and ice on the road. And the night before, we drove through a blizzard. You can see it on our Facebook page if you want a better look at it. And it's still to this day my favourite picture of my last truck, and kind of it just sums up travelling to me. So and you're right. With coming out of lockdown, it's really a good chance for people to explore New Zealand. A lot of you might be going overseas and planning trips overseas, which we'll see how long that's going to take before it goes back to over international travel. So it's a really good chance to explore New Zealand. And make the most of, we live in an absolutely stunning country, and we might not have all these big distances to drive, but the scenery is just absolutely spectacular, especially, North and South Island. It's quite diverse.
Yeah, and we're lucky because it's easy to drive around the country too, and a little bit off-roading, you can get to these magic spots with no one else around, so it's very cool.
Exactly right, yeah. Especially with no tourists coming in, we're going to have these places all to ourselves.
That's it, mate. It'll just be the annoying Kiwis now, not the annoying tourists.
That's right. Kiwis driving around in camper vans.
And maybe some Aussies soon if they open up the borders.
Yeah, we'll let the Aussies over. They make some good stuff. No, it'd be good. It'd be good to see some Aussies coming over actually, and sharing some of the four-wheel driving that we have to offer here, or even just the touring. You don't have to have a four-wheel drive. You can put all the stuff in a camper van or something like that. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
I've just got a question here from Marcus. What size inverter for a camera, etc., and charging needs? So my inverter that I'm running in my car is 1,000 watt pure sine wave REDARC inverter, which is, I would say, for just charging a bit of camera gear and a laptop is overkill. 300 watt is ample for a laptop and a camera. I also charge the drone that sucks quite a lot of power, so that's why I've stepped it up to that. But what's your thoughts on that, Greg?
Yeah, look, it's really, really easy to work it out. So every 230-volt appliance that plugs into the wall socket at home will actually tell you either how many watts it draws, so it'll 400 watts, 1,000 watts, whatever it might be, or it'll say how many amps it draws. And you're looking at the input side. So if you are looking at like I don't know what it might be, a hairdryer or something for your missus, and it says it draws, like 4 amps or whatever it is at 230 volts or 240 volts, all you do is you go, right, 240 times 4, that gives you how many watts? So it's almost 1,000 watts, okay, if it's 4 amps. And then you go, okay, well, I'm not just going to, I might want to power something else. So you look at all the things that you might want to power, and you look at the most high-powered device. If it's 1,000 watts, I would go with a 1,500 watt inverter to give yourself a little bit of headspace. Give yourself a bit of headroom. And you might turn around and go, does my missus really need that hairdryer? Probably not. She can just wear a hat for the week, sweet ass. So what's the next, lowest drawing piece of equipment? So, and also you'd go, all right, if I've got, like Lars has, drone batteries, camera batteries, you add it all up. So you might go, right, my drone battery charger draws 200 watts. My camera battery draws 150 watts. That's 350 watts. All right, I'll go with a 350, or you just go to the next bigger size just to give yourself a little bit of headroom. So yeah, that's my recommendation. So that side of it is super easy to work out. Just look at what you want to run, do the math on it, work out what the wattage is, and then just go one size bigger. Yeah,
no, it's some really good points there. I've got one from Tim here. Good points there, Greg. You also have to replace the contents of your fridge. Not great for those steaks, assuming you can buy them remotely. Yeah, good point. It really is. You know, like you've got all your food. You don't want to let that spoil, and it really is a game changer having cold beer
Yeah.
when you park up finally, and not pulling out
Oh,
soggy food.
yeah. That's the soggy food one, mate. Having your esky or chili bin, as we call it over here, you know, and you're there for a few days, and then your tray of meat is sitting there and it's flooded with water. You just like, this is gross.
Yeah, no,
You have a fridge running properly, and it's just sweet.
Yeah, when I went from running a chili bin to a fridge, it was just, and I went camping with a guy, Richard from 4X for Explorer. He might, if he's watching, he'll remember this. We went camping together, and he was telling me, "Nah, I don't need a fridge. I don't need a fridge." Came camping with me, and literally the next week he put a dual battery system in a fridge.
Oh yeah, it's awesome, mate. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Last one here. There's Fox for Camping, Bulgaria. It depends on what kind of camera batteries. For example, if it's a simple GoPro or small camera, you might not need an inverter. Also, installing an inverter, you need a larger battery. Yeah, good point there. You know, a lot of things nowadays are being charged through USB, so you don't need an inverter. It really is only if you need to power something that's 240 volt. You need the inverter. Most things can be charged through USB these days.
Yeah, that is a really good point. I will quite often get a lot of older folk will say, you know, they'll come up to us at a show and they'll say, I want an inverter, and I'll say, what for? They say, charging my phone, because they're used to plugging their phone into the wall at home.
Yeah. That's
the only way they know how. Whereas, you know, a lot, like this gentleman said, there's a lot of accessories that you can get chargers that go from 12 volt, and they'll either step up to a higher DC voltage or they'll step down to 5 volt USB. So definitely, look, if you can get a good quality charger that's safe to run to charge your equipment, by all means do it, because it's more efficient. But if you really need an inverter, you know, and you're going to spend the money on it, get a decent one that's going to give you peace of mind, run efficiently. But only get an inverter if you absolutely need it. And look, we all, you know, again, you want cold beers, but then if it's cold in the morning, you want to run your coffee machine. So, you know, you're going to need an inverter.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, I just bring a percolator with me. I haven't, I haven't got the battery capacity to run the coffee machine yet.
Yeah, fully. Yeah, same thing, isn't it?
No, I think there's been some really good questions there. I'm really, you know, it's great to see people kind of pitching in, and thanks for all the questions coming in. This is the first of hopefully many interviews I'll do. You know, it's kind of proven that the technology is there, so we can chat online. And when I get out of lockdown finally, and I get actually out of my hotel room, I'll be able to set up a bit of a studio with some better cameras and things like that. But I think it's worked okay with one man sitting behind a laptop. Have you got a question in mind? So with this gauge, have you got a question in mind that stood out to you that you think is worthy of winning this oil pressure gauge and temperature gauge?
Oh, look, I think it's just going to have to be a random draw, mate, against all of the names. Okay. Whether or not you can work that out in the short time we've got left, I'm not sure. But look, I'd just pick a random name, mate, because they've all been really good questions.
There have been some good questions coming in.
Yeah, definitely.
We'll just have a quick look through them. If anyone's got any questions while I'm reading through them, fire them through now.
Yeah, definitely. And I just want to give a little bit of a shout out while Lars is doing that to my hometown of Taupo in New Zealand. I'm drinking their Lakeman Pilsner beer, so you know, get some of that down here, share it around with some of the little guys, you know, the smaller breweries and so on.
Yeah.
Shout out to you guys down there.
Lakeman's in Taupo. I'm going to have to try that. I had two options. I had Starnlager Classic and Starnlager Pure. That's about all my hotel is serving.
Nice. Well, at least you got the option, mate.
At least I had the option. That's right. Yeah. Although there's a limit. 4 beers a day.
It could have been Lion Brown and Lion Red. That would have been it.
Well, Joe, the comments will start flooding in a second.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Definitely.
What we got here? There's been some really, really good questions.
Yeah, we don't have like a random ball generator like a lotto thing.
I wish I did.
Put a name on a ball. And
I wish I did.
You don't have one of those in your hotel room? Far out.
No, I think I'll have to. I'll have to pick one here. Let's go with John Simpson.
Nice.
So John, if you
John.
if you're still online here, mate, I'll try and get in touch with you through YouTube. Otherwise, if you want to send me a message through my the Full Drive New Zealand Facebook page, or the email address that's on our YouTube channel, send me a message, mate, and we'll get that sent out to you. That's a oil pressure gauge and a voltmeter all in one, 52 minute. But there it is on the screen.
So it's what we call a G52 PWT. So it's water temp and oil pressure all in one. So and it also has alerts built in. So the whole face of the gauge actually changes color when you get low oil pressure or high water temp. So really, really good insurance for your engine. So that is an awesome prize.
There we go. There we go. John Simpson just copied back saying, awesome. Thanks, guys. So you read it. Very cool.
Nice. Congrats, John.
So, yeah, like I said, just if you jump on our Facebook page, just send us a message through there, and we'll work it out through that. I think it's time to wrap it up. Thank you very much for joining us, Greg. It's been, almost spilled my beer.
Oh, mate.
It's been...
don't worry, it's only a hotel couch, mate.
That's right. No, I think it's been quite successful, and we'll have to do it again. Hopefully next time we actually get to catch up in person.
Yeah, definitely, mate. Yeah, when you get out of there, is it Monday or Sunday?
I get out on Monday. I've done my time, so it's time to get home. I haven't actually seen my family in about 2.5 months. So looking forward to my son turned 1 last month and on the 20th. So missed his birthday, which I was supposed to be home for.
Yeah.
Definitely looking good. And I haven't seen the truck in 2.5 months either, so pretty keen to get working on the 76.
Yeah, the new baby.
Yeah, the new baby. So this is obviously, as you know, this thing's being replaced. Where is it? There it is. With the 76 series, and we're busy. We did a big sandblasting. We sandblasted the underbody, had it resprayed, basically rust prevention on it, and then ARB. We put an ARB summit bar on the front already. So that's what we did last time. The videos are due to come out. One's coming out next week. And then we've got some awesome other exciting stuff planned. And then I'm going to be knocking on your door, mate, when it comes to time to filling up the BMS system again. So.
Oh, mate, it's going to be good. Can't wait.
Can't wait.
Yeah. Can't wait.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Good.
Thanks, guys. To everyone there, thanks so much for tuning in. It's been good. We'll do it again. And we'll see you soon on the next video.
Definitely. And look, any more questions, if you can't comment on any of these videos, like if you don't have a YouTube account or a Facebook account or whatever, just go to our website and get in contact with us and just send us an email or give us a call anytime. More than happy to answer any of your questions. So, and thanks very much for tuning in, guys. And thanks for having me, Lars. Awesome.
No problem at all.
All good. Magic. Thanks, mate.